All right, let's take a look at the track in Logic, and I'll explain some of the effects that I have going on. Right now I have all of them as sends over here. I could have just put them here on the channel because there's only one track in Logic, but the way I have my default project template set up, all the effects that I want to use are right here in my sends for bus 20, bus 25, bus 26, bus 19. They're already ready to go, so it just saves me some clicks to have these set up by default. Then all I got to do is turn them on and set the levels. So here's the dry signal of the Matriarch with no effects going on. All right, so it sounds good, but it is a little dry. The first thing that I want to talk about that probably has the biggest effect is this delay. And I'm using soft tube tape echoes, which is my favorite delay. I use it on every track, and it just sounds so good. So I've got it set to a dotted eighth note here. The wet dry is all the way up on to 100% wet, but that's because I'm using it as a send, and so I control the amount right here. So the relative mix between dry and wet is controlled by the main volume of the track, which of course will be the dry signal, and then how much I send over to the delay, which will be the wet signal. So let's hear how that sounds. And already right there, you can see that it's taking on quite a nice dreamy quality to it just with that tape delay. Okay, let's turn that off for a second. The next thing I want to talk about is my bus 26, which is my plate reverb. So this is one of my newest sort of go-to effects that I found myself putting into a lot of tracks. I never really used plate reverb until Soundtoys gave this away for free recently, and so I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll grab it. And I really liked the effect that it put on the tracks that I used it in. So now it's just in one of my default buses to put on anything. And so what plate reverb does is it just smears the sound a little bit. It makes it a little bit less precise, a little bit less, punctual maybe, and just, yeah, like I said, smears it. So let's hear how that sounds just all by itself. And off. And back on. So it's a nice little dreamy, smearing sort of reverb. Okay, next let's listen to my main normal reverb, which is Chromaverb right here. So I don't have it turned up too much. In fact, it's the lowest of all the 4 effects that I have on this track. And that is because a lot of the main large reverb is coming from Valhalla Supermassive here, which is just a huge reverb with, I think it's got a built-in delay going on too on this setting. Let's give it a listen. So just for comparison, again, dry track, and with the effect on. You can see it's just like echoing out into outer space. It's just huge. I love it. This, of course, is a free plugin. So now let's turn all 3 of the reverbs on. Oh yeah. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Finally, let's throw that delay back in. Oh, there it is, the dotted eighth delay. And then you can hear the tail just echoing off into space. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at the Matriarch itself. So I have an arpeggiator coming from Logic back there into the Matriarch, and I'll just turn this volume up here. There we go. So right now, you can see the only thing on is oscillator 2, which is a sawtooth wave, nothing real fancy here. It's got a little bit of an envelope. So of course that's a big thing that I play with. It really affects the sound. And that's taking the cutoff, and it's just starting it a lot higher and then bringing it down. So it's the same as if I were to take the cutoff knob and go and wiggling it manually, but of course I don't want to have to be doing that the whole time that we play. So I just automate that sound here. I have the attack set all the way down at the bottom, so it's a nice sharp punchy sound. But one of the things you can play with is the attack time. I don't really ever go crazy with this, but if you put it up close to about that first line there, you can get a little bit of a brassy whomp 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 sound. And then past that first line, you start getting into more like pad or soft or accelerating sound territory. But of course, you can't really hear that with a 16th note ARP, so that'll be a subject for a different video, I guess. I do like to keep the decay time pretty short, and my sustain is usually pretty low. So I set, the way I figure out how I want all these things to work together is usually I will set the cutoff to be the lowest point that I want to hear the sound. So if I want a little bit of sustain in the sound, but it to be kind of muffled and quiet, kind of like it is right now, I'll just find the point at which that sounds right to me. Like this is of course too high. I want it to come down right about to there. Then you take this knob and figure out how high you want it to go. Like that's too sharp. That sounds about right. Then I'll put the sustain pretty low, all the way down or close to it. And then this knob, the decay, is going to be how long you want that transition to last. So there, the decay is so high that we're not even coming all the way down between the notes. But here, you can hear it starting high and coming all the way down. I usually keep my amplitude almost the opposite in terms of sustain. I usually like the sound to keep going, but at a quieter sort of set of frequencies. I don't usually like to cut it off entirely, but you can. Similarly, you can play around with the attack here, but usually I set it all the way down or just a hair off, and then I just leave it there. I typically don't play around with the amplitude section during songs like this very much. Then the other big thing is I like to start with the delay pretty dry, maybe a little bit of it in there or maybe none at all, but it makes a nice sound if as the piece goes on you start to open this up, then it adds like a new dimension to the sound and that adds interest. So you start with it off and then you add it, because that's increasing the interest factor. You wouldn't really go the other way around, because that's taking away interest, unless you were doing it on purpose, of course, for some sort of break or like a dramatic variation in the sound. But the biggest thing I enjoy playing with is the time on this delay, because it stretches the audio. It makes for some interesting effects there. So there you go. Okay, let's hop back over to the mixer. So the other thing that I mixed in over the course of the song was 2 square waves. This one here is an octave. Oh, I was going to say it's an octave lower. It's not. This third one is an octave higher. So you can hear it adds a nice little series of overtones on top. And I think that in the course of the video, I had it synced so that I could add some more upper harmonics by increasing the pitch. But notably, the main fundamental of this oscillator stays in sync with the main notes that are going on. So if you disable this, it's also an interesting sound that I used at one point towards the very end when I was letting it get a little crazy. There we go. Throwing in some noise is always a nice idea. Let's flip this down one. Get all 3 octaves going there. Down. So, I hope that was beneficial and maybe you learned a thing or two. That's all for now.